Hey, Chi Alpha family, this is Mario Solari, Southeast Area Director, and coming up next is Justin Felch. Justin is the District Director for the great state of Alabama, and he's doing a phenomenal job. I had the chance to chime in on one of his district committee meetings, and I'm just really blessed of his leadership. Alabama is doing great. The state is just doing fantastic, and we're proud of him. He's going to be teaching on suicide and crisis intervention. I mean, this is something that's really pertinent on the college campuses. So I pray that you'll pay attention, take notes, that God will minister to you so you can minister through you. Don't forget, there's a code word. It's a TV show. And if you get them all right, and we put your name in a hat, and then hopefully you'll win a 4-night stay in Wears Valley. God bless you.
Hey, Chi Alpha staff. Today I want to talk to you about an important issue. I want to talk to you about suicide and crisis intervention for campus ministers. Now, before I get started, I need to give you a disclaimer and a warning because this video is going to be posted on the internet and other people are going to be able to see it. And so if you're watching this video, I want to make sure you understand that as campus ministers, we are often put in places where we have to assist and aid and minister to students who may be dealing with a mental health crisis or who may be in a suicidal crisis. And there are things that we need to know how to do and to react and handle those situations, but we are not qualified as campus ministers to make assessments about mental health, to determine treatment, or to force anyone to do anything that they're not willing to do. Today, what I want to talk to you mostly is about knowing the resources that are available to you and having a plan for how you're going to access these resources. And so I just want to caution you that this is not designed for you to be able to handle suicidal students or people in mental health crisis on your own without help. You need to trust and rely on medical and mental health professionals to help you handle these situations. And so today I want to share some information with you that maybe you're aware of and maybe you're not. Did you know that suicide is the second leading cause of death among American college students? It comes right behind accidents, and most of those accidents involve alcohol or drugs. 1 in 5 American adults lives with a mental illness. Most mental illness presents for the first time during late adolescence and early adulthood. That means it's not uncommon at all for students to experience their first ever mental health crisis, their first ever suicidal thoughts while they're sitting in their dorm away from their family at a time when many of them, the people closest to them, may be the people in their small group, maybe their campus pastor. Many of those students may be afraid to tell their parents what's really going on for fear of being judged or ostracized by their family. And so it's not uncommon at all for small group leaders, for staff members in Chi Alpha to be the first people that students may reach out to or who might have an idea that something is not okay with their students. This is not an uncommon issue. This is an issue that is common on all university campuses. And as campus ministers, we need to be prepared to minister to students who are going through this very difficult time in their life, to be the hands and feet of Jesus, to be able to serve them, to encourage them, to help direct them to the right resources so that they can get the help that they need. As campus pastors, we usually don't have to preach many funerals, but I often wonder and think how terrible it would have to be if I had to preach a funeral of a student in our ministry or on our campus that had committed suicide, and how I would feel if I had not done everything in my power to make sure that student had the resources they needed to be healthy and safe. And so today I want to talk to you about some really simple things that you and your staff can do to make sure that you're prepared to minister to your students who may have suicidal thoughts or be in a mental health crisis. The two things that I really want to encourage you today is this: to know the resources available to you on your campus and in your city, and to maintain appropriate boundaries. If you do these two things, you will be able to minister to your students who are suffering from a mental health crisis or who are suffering a suicidal crisis. Before I served as a missionary with Chi Alpha. I attended Troy University, and I have a master's degree in counseling and psychology. And I worked briefly at the local mental health center here in town, where part of my job was to take crisis calls, to do crisis analysis or assessment, to go to the ER when someone was suspected of suicidal thoughts or self-harm or harm of others. And so this is something that I do have some experience with outside of campus ministry. And so I want to give you some tips and some ideas. I'm going to share some thoughts with you. But my thoughts and ideas and these tips, these are not prescriptive. These are not a playbook that you can follow to handle every situation, because every situation is different. Every campus has different protocols. Every city has different resources. And so it's important that you rely on mental health professionals and medical professionals in your area and follow the protocols that are on your campus. But in order to do that, you have to know what resources are available to you, what policies are in place in your university. Who is the point person that would be contacted if a student is living in a dorm and is thinking thoughts of self-harm or harming others? What are the resources that are available to you in the community? Does your campus counseling center handle these crises? Or does your local mental health center or does your hospital have staff that are psychiatrists that handle these? What is the appropriate avenue for you to help these students seek help? What does your university expect you to do? Do they expect you to notify them if you believe that a student may be a danger to themselves or others? Do they have certain programs available for students? How will they respond if you reach out to them? And so these are questions that you have to ask before you're put in a place to deal with this. The other thing that I think is very important for us to realize is that often we are asking 19 and 20-year-old college students coming into their sophomore year to lead small groups. And those 19 and 20-year-old college students may have never experienced anything. They may have never heard someone talk about harming themselves or others, may have never heard someone talk about what it's like to be depressed or to be in the middle of an episode or a panic attack. And so how are you going to prepare your small group leaders, your student leaders, with the tools they need? Who are they going to contact if a student shares with them in a one-on-one or small group setting that they are having thoughts of harming themselves? How do you expect your students to prepare? And so a key here is to make sure you know the resources that are available and make sure your student leaders know the resources that you expect them to use if this situation were to happen. If we wait until this happens in our ministry or till our student is dealing with this to try to develop a system or a plan, then we may have waited too late. In the 15 years that I've been doing ministry with Chi Alpha, I can't remember a year that's gone by that there hasn't been at least one student in our ministry who struggled with a major mental health crisis or with suicidal ideation or thoughts to the point that they needed intervention. And so it's important that we are prepared. Know the phone numbers. Is there a 1-800 crisis line staffed by local mental health or other people? Is there a national hotline that your city recommends or your campus recommends that you use? Is campus police available to come and help and possibly even transport people who may need immediate care because they might be a danger to themselves or because they might not just be okay being left alone because of their mental state? And so these are things that you need to ask. You need to ask your university officials, your campus police, your local mental health center, and you need to find out, if this happens, how are we going to respond? How are we going to give our students the tools that they need to successfully overcome this difficult time in their life so that there can be a next semester, so that there can be an opportunity to finish school, so that they can move forward, and so that we can be the hands and feet of Jesus in what is certainly a very difficult time in the lives of college students. So know your resources. I'll talk a little bit more about what those resources will look like, but they may look different for each person. The other thing is I want to really stress to you that it's important that we maintain appropriate boundaries. You are not a counselor. You are not a doctor. You are not a mental health professional. You are not trained for suicide assessment or mental health diagnosis. You are not that student's parent or guardian. You are not their caretaker in that sense. And for you to cross boundaries into relationships that are not intended for you will be hurtful for those students, and it'll be hurtful for your ministry. So I want to encourage you, whenever possible, rely on mental health professionals, rely on professional counselors, rely on doctors, rely on university administrators to handle this situation so that you can continue to serve in the role of support and encouragement and someone to pray and listen when this person needs it, when this student needs it. One of the very difficult things about these types of situations is that often a student who's in the middle of a mental health crisis or a suicidal crisis may not want other people to know what's happening. They may not want their parents to know. They may not want to have to talk to a counselor about what they're thinking or feeling, and they may be very resistant to the help that they really do need. And in some of these situations, someone else may have to make those decisions for them. But it is best if that is a professional in the mental health field or a university official who has to make that decision. Because after this person receives the treatment that they need, the hope is that they're going to be able to continue to be a student on your university, and they're going to need support. They're going to need encouragement. They're going to need prayer, and they're going to need a home community to be a part of. And if they're angry at you or angry at their small group leader because you made them do something they didn't like or want to do, if there's animosity there, it's going to be very difficult for you to then shift those boundaries back to just be their pastor when you put yourself in the role of their counselor or caretaker. Something I also want to encourage you, small group leaders love the people in their small group. Small group leaders meet one-on-one with the people in their small group. They know things about that person that other people don't know, and they care very deeply for those people. And so your small group leaders may be tempted to put themselves in the role of a caretaker, to be someone who watches over them. And in the past, I've seen this happen. I've seen students try to keep an eye on people around the clock, to even encourage people to move in or to ask roommates to take that role. And the reality is once you shift that relationship into that type of role, it's very difficult to ever shift it back to a friendship or even a mentorship. And so I want to encourage you, students may be hesitant for you to talk to their parents, but their parents are probably the best people in most situations to help them make those decisions or to provide that level of care. It's just not normal or natural that a pastor or even a small group leader or friend would have to provide that level of care that a person in a mental health crisis or suicidal crisis might need at that moment. So I would encourage you to maintain appropriate boundaries so that you can continue to be this person's pastor. You can continue to encourage them. Make sure you prepare your small group leaders or you coach your small group leaders to make sure they're maintaining appropriate boundaries and not becoming overly responsible for someone when ultimately they can't really affect the change that person needs in their life at that time. Now, the last thing I want to talk to you about, and this is what I think is the most difficult for us, because as campus pastors, we are not equipped to make a determination of when someone is really a threat to themselves or to decide what level of care or treatment a student might need. But this is difficult because oftentimes, because of the close-knit community in Chi Alpha, because of the one-on-one interaction and the support people receive from their small group or from their pastoral staff, it's very likely that we may be the first people to know what's going on in someone's life. And so for us to know, how do I respond to this situation is very difficult. And so I want to talk to you about some principles and ideas that mental health professionals use in making those determinations. But I want to be very clear. I'm not saying that you are qualified to make these determinations, but I want to help you have an idea of how to use the resources you have appropriately. More than likely, what may happen is you may have someone that says in your ministry, "Oh, I'm thinking it would just all be better if life were over, if I weren't here anymore." People may make different statements that you may pick up on. The key to this is to ask open-ended questions without suggesting. So you never want to ask a question like, "So how long have you been thinking about killing yourself?" You want to stay away from those words. You want to ask, "How long have you been thinking about this? Tell me more about what you're thinking about." So we want to know, have students actually been thinking about these things? What's really going on? The next thing we want to know is, do they have an idea in their mind of, or a plan of how they're going to do this? Now, we don't want to ask, do you have a plan? But maybe we want to ask, have you thought about what that would look like? Have you thought about how you would do that? And then if they have a plan, we want to know, do you have means to do the things that you've been thinking about? And so if someone is thinking about harming themselves, we want to know, how long have they been thinking about it? We want to know, do they have a plan of how they would do that? And do we want to know, do they have the means to do that? And each of these levels represents another level of escalation that we need to go to. And so this may be different if it's day or night, if it's during the office hours of your local mental health center. Maybe you could just encourage that person to drive there, and or maybe get in the car and ride over there. If this is at night, maybe you need to go to a local ER or even call 911. And so we need to be prepared to ask questions and have these conversations. What we don't want to do is we don't want to just pray for someone and assume they're okay, and then find out the next day that they've harmed themselves or someone else. And so we want to be prepared to provide good quality pastoral care and oversight to students who are going through mental health crisis while they're on our campus. And we want to prepare our student leaders for the challenges that we face in the day that we live in. I pray that there is a day that we have no more suicide, that we have no more mental health. And I believe that that's what the kingdom of Jesus is ushering in, that one day that day will come. But until that day comes, we need to be prepared to minister to the hurting and broken people who live on our campus, and to be an example of what it looks like to love people the way that they need to be loved. And so I hope this is helpful for you. I hope you've learned something. But I want to caution you, this is not intended to be prescriptive or to train you to be a mental health professional or to make diagnostic decisions or to decide if someone is a threat to themselves or others. The most important thing you can do is to know the resources are available and to have them available to you so that in that moment you can utilize them.